A frozen wasteland hides a secret that rewrites human history. Beneath miles of Antarctic ice lies a landscape that ancient maps should not exist. We are about to explore 25 ancient maps that depict this continent not as a solid sheet of ice, but as a land with rivers, mountains, and coastlines. These charts, created centuries before the continent's official discovery, challenge the very foundations of our historical timeline. They suggest a forgotten chapter of exploration by a civilization capable of global navigation in a warmer world. How did medieval cartographers draw a land buried under ice for millions of years, and whose lost knowledge were they copying? What does it mean for our story if the world was mapped long before we ever believed possible? Are you ready to question everything you thought you knew about our past? The year was 1929, and within the dusty archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, a forgotten piece of parchment was about to ignite a historical firestorm. This was the map of the Ottoman admiral Piri Reis, drawn in 1513. Its discovery sent immediate shockwaves through the world of academia, for it depicted the world with a knowledge that should not have existed. The map's rendering of the eastern coast of South America was startlingly precise, but it was the southern Atlantic that held the true mystery. There, stretching below, was a vast landmass with detailed coastlines, mountains, and even what appeared to be rivers. This was a land that, according to all official records, would not be discovered for another 300 years. It was Antarctica, yet this was not the frozen continent we know today. This depiction showed a land free of its immense ice cap, a landscape that has not been visible for millions of years. The map's own creator provided the most tantalizing clue. In his annotations, Admiral Reis did not claim this as his own discovery. He wrote plainly that he had compiled his work from a multitude of older source maps, some of which he stated dated all the way back to the Library of Alexandria, to the time of Alexander the Great. He was merely a copyist, preserving fragments of a far more ancient geography. So the question is no longer just what the map shows, but whose eyes first saw that ice-free shore, and what unimaginably old knowledge was being faithfully traced onto that Turkish parchment centuries later. Just 8 years after the Piri Reis Map was drawn, another cartographic masterpiece appeared that deepened the mystery exponentially. Created by the French scholar Oronteus Finaeus in 1531, his world map presents a landmass at the South Pole of such stunning detail that it defies all contemporary understanding. This is not a vague, speculative shape. It is a recognizable continent with deep inlets, winding rivers, and distinct mountain ranges. The most astonishing part is that the features he drew align almost perfectly with the subglacial topography of Antarctica, the actual landscape hidden beneath miles of solid ice that we have only been able to map with modern seismic technology. He depicted a massive bay that corresponds to the Ross Sea, and a sprawling river system that matches the channels we now know are carved beneath the ice sheet. How could a man in the 16th century possibly know what the land looked like under an ice cap that has existed for millions of years? The map shows a continent that has not been ice-free since a time when early humans were just beginning to use stone tools. This profound enigma was brought into the modern spotlight in the 1960s by a history professor named Charles Hapgood. While meticulously studying the Oronteus Finaeus Map, Hapgood and his students made a breathtaking realization. They overlaid the ancient chart with our modern, scientifically accurate maps of the subglacial continent. The correlation was undeniable. The mountain ranges were in the right places, the coastal inlets matched the known subglacial shelves, and the overall shape was eerily correct. Hapgood concluded that Oronteus Finaeus, like Piri Reis before him, could not have invented this geography. He must have been working from far older source maps, drawn by an advanced seafaring civilization that explored the world in a remote, ice-free age. This single document does not just hint at lost knowledge, it screams of a forgotten epoch of human exploration, a chapter so old its authors have been completely erased from our history books. A third map, drawn by the Ottoman cartographer Hadji Ahmed in 1559, pushes the boundaries of this mystery even further. This is not a simple nautical chart, but an elaborate and ornate world map, bursting with artistic detail and a geographical scope that seems to defy the era of its creation. Its most immediate shock is in the north, where it clearly illustrates a vast land bridge connecting Siberia to Alaska. Modern science confirms this was real, a region known as Beringia that was above sea level until the end of the last ice age, thousands of years before Hadji Ahmed put ink to paper. But this accurate depiction of a long-vanished landscape is only the beginning. The true focus of our puzzle lies at the bottom of the map. There, sprawled across the southern pole, is a colossal continent rendered with a stunning level of coastal detail. This is not the blob-like Terra Australis Incognita of other medieval maps, a hypothetical filler continent. The coastlines are jagged and specific, with bays, peninsulas, and inland features that suggest a real, surveyed coastline, a land someone had actually seen and recorded. Most critically, this southern land is completely free of ice. Its rivers flow to the sea, and its mountains rise from a green earth, portraying a continent that has been locked in a deep freeze for millions of years. The sheer intricacy of the map, from its accurate northern land bridge to its detailed southern continent, makes it incredibly difficult to dismiss as mere guesswork. The style and some of the geographical conceptions have led scholars to propose a breathtaking origin, that Hadji Ahmed was working from a source map that dated back to the ancient Greek or even Phoenician civilizations, master mariners whose own world maps have been completely lost to time. This single document suggests a continuous thread of ancient knowledge, a secret atlas of the world passed down and copied, its original authors forgotten, but their impossible geography stubbornly preserved. The mystery deepens with a map from the Age of Enlightenment, a time when reason was supposed to have triumphed over ancient superstition. In 1737, the esteemed French geographer Philippe Buache published a revolutionary chart of the southern polar region. This was not a fanciful sketch, but a detailed, scientific work produced 2 full decades before the continent of Antarctica was officially discovered. Buache's depiction is bizarrely specific, showing not one single landmass, but 2 large islands separated by a wide, frozen sea. For centuries, this was dismissed as the flawed theory of a man who had simply guessed wrong. But modern technology has revealed a shocking truth. Buache's frozen sea aligns almost perfectly with the vast, ice-filled rift that runs across the continent, a geological feature we now know as the Transantarctic Mountains. This mountain range effectively divides Antarctica into 2 distinct geological regions, just as Buache's map suggests. He did not show a solid continent, he showed a bifurcated one, a fact completely unknown to his contemporaries and only confirmed by our own subglacial surveys in the 20th century. How could he have possibly known this? The answer, according to Buache himself, lies in sources far older than his own era. He openly stated that his map was a compilation drawn from ancient sea charts that had been preserved for centuries. He pointed to the Phoenicians, the legendary seafaring civilization that circumnavigated Africa thousands of years ago, as the possible originators of this lost knowledge. His claims were met with scorn and ridicule by the scientific establishment of his day, who could not accept that so-called primitive ancients possessed a geography more advanced than their own. Yet his map remains a stubborn artifact that perfectly illustrates a reality hidden beneath miles of ice, a secret the ice itself has kept for millennia. If a respected 18th century cartographer was relying on maps from a long-vanished civilization, how many other clues have we simply refused to see? The plot thickens as we travel back even further to the year 1380, and a Venetian map shrouded in equal parts legend and startling accuracy. This is the Zeno map, a document attributed to the noble Zeno brothers who claim to have sailed the treacherous North Atlantic. While its detailed rendering of islands like Greenland is impressive for its time, the real intrigue lies in what it may show at the bottom of the world. Alongside its primary charting of the North, the map depicts a vast, mysterious southern landmass, a place some researchers believe is another early and impossible glimpse of Antarctica. This southern continent is drawn with distinct non-glacial features, suggesting coastlines free from the crushing weight of ice. The map is a strange puzzle, blending what we now know to be real geography with mythical islands like Friesland, a place that never existed. This very mixture is the heart of the debate. Was the Zeno map based on the genuine, first-hand accounts of Norse explorers, Vikings who sailed farther than history remembers and whose sagas contained whispers of lands beyond the ice? Or were the Zenos themselves working from even older, more cryptic source maps, charts drawn by seafaring cultures whose names are lost to us entirely? The possibility that real geographical knowledge of the far south was preserved and then accidentally mingled with myth only makes the Zeno map more compelling. It stands as a ghostly testament, suggesting that the thread of this lost cartography was not broken, but simply frayed, its truths waiting for centuries to be recognized. Even the father of modern map-making himself could not escape the pull of this ancient mystery. Gerardus Mercator, the brilliant cartographer who gave us the navigational projection that bears his name, published his great world map in 1569. It is a landmark of science and reason, yet it holds a profound secret at its bottom edge. Like his contemporaries, Mercator depicted a vast southern continent labeled Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. The standard explanation is that he included it for theoretical balance, a philosophical belief that the continents of the north must be counterweighted by an equally large landmass in the south. But a closer look reveals something far more intriguing. The shape of his southern continent is not a simple, blob-like placeholder. In his later maps, the coastline becomes more defined, with specific bays, capes, and inward curving gulfs that eerily suggest a real coastline, not an artist's fancy. This level of detail goes far beyond what was needed for philosophical symmetry. So where did he get these refined shapes? Mercator was a meticulous scholar who openly credited his sources. He studied the works of other great cartographers, including his own namesake, and more importantly, he pored over ancient portolan charts, the detailed sailing maps used by medieval Mediterranean sailors. These portolans were themselves believed to be copies of even older knowledge. Mercator was not just drawing a theory, he was compiling. He was stitching together fragments of geography from maps that should not have existed, piecing together a ghost image of a continent that had been ice-locked for eons. His genius was in his method, but the southern land on his chart is a haunting echo, a composite sketch of a world that was mapped long before his own time. Two of the most compelling and beautiful artifacts in this entire mystery come from the very dawn of the 15th century. The King James World Map, a Catalan masterpiece, presents a rim of the known world with startling precision. Its depiction of Europe, Africa, and Asia is detailed, but its edges hint at something more, a fragmented southern landmass that seems to pull at the borders of the chart. It is a map that suggests its creator knew the world did not simply end in an empty ocean, that there was something substantial, something real, waiting in the far south. This tantalizing fragment is only the beginning. Around the same time, between 1411 and 1415, another cartographic wonder was created, the De Virga World Map. This circular planisphere is one of the most stunningly beautiful maps of its entire era, a work of art as much as a work of geography, and at its bottom it clearly illustrates a vast southern continent. This is not a vague shape. The land is drawn with distinct coastlines and, most incredibly, what appear to be river systems flowing from its interior out to the sea. These are features that could not exist if the continent were encased in its present-day ice cap. They depict a living, breathing landscape, a land of flowing water and exposed earth. The tragedy is that the original De Verga map is lost to history. Its existence is known only from a single, precious photograph taken before it vanished. This single image is all that remains of a map that dared to show a green Antarctica, making it one of the most enigmatic ghosts in the entire story of cartography. We are left with a haunting question. If such a beautiful and detailed map was created over 600 years ago, what other masterpieces of lost geography have vanished without a trace, taking their secrets with them forever? While the grand masters of cartography were publishing their world maps, a more practical and urgent kind of chart was being drawn in the map-making houses of Lisbon and Seville. These were the Portuguese Portolan charts, and they were not works of philosophical speculation. They were vital tools of survival and conquest, used by the captains of Portugal's mighty fleet of explorers as they pushed the boundaries of the known world. Among these anonymous, sea-stained navigational charts, a pattern begins to emerge, a ghostly landmass that appears again and again in the southern oceans. One of the most persistent and puzzling of these features is a large continent often labeled Jave la Grande. It appears on numerous charts from the early to mid-16th century, a sprawling land that seems to hang below the islands of Southeast Asia. The conventional explanation is that this was a rough, early sighting of Australia, misplaced far to the west of its actual location, but a closer look raises profound questions. The shape and orientation of Jave la Grande on some of these charts do not neatly align with Australia. Its western coastline, in particular, bears a strange and unsettling resemblance to the eastern coast of an ice-free Antarctica, specifically the region of Queen Maud Land. Could the Portuguese, the greatest explorers of their age, have stumbled upon the fringes of the southern continent itself and simply recorded it as this great new land, Jave la Grande, not yet understanding the monumental scale of what they had found? The clues become even more compelling when we examine two specific, magnificent atlases created in the very same year. In 1519, the same year Magellan set off on his voyage to circumnavigate the globe, two masterpieces were completed. The Lopo Homum Reunais Atlas and the famous Miller Atlas represent the absolute pinnacle of Portuguese cartography. They are breathtakingly beautiful, filled with vibrant colors and intricate illustrations, but their true value lies in their geography. In these works, the depiction of the southern land is not a vague blob. It is a distinct, clearly defined continent with a recognizable shape. Its coastlines are drawn with a confidence that suggests this was more than a sailor's tall tale. It was considered a real, charted place. The progression is clear, from the anonymous portolans hinting at a great southern land, to these lavish atlases presenting it as a geographic fact. These were not maps for public display. They were state secrets, the crown jewels of Portugal's imperial knowledge, created for the king himself. The inclusion of this southern continent in such authoritative and practical documents is perhaps the most significant clue of all. It tells us that the world's leading maritime power believed, with a high degree of certainty, that a vast land existed at the bottom of the world. The question that haunts us is, were they discovering it for the first time, or were they slowly rediscovering a coastline that had been mapped millennia before, its true identity lost in the translation of ancient, crumbling source maps? The work of Jean Rots adds another definitive layer to this growing body of evidence. A French hydrographer in the service of King Henry VIII of England, Rots completed his magnificent book of hydrography in 1542. His world map presents a sprawling terra australis, but its coastline is anything but smooth or speculative. It is deeply and dramatically indented, featuring sharp promontories, deep bays, and river-like inlets that carve far into the continental interior. These are not the features of a mythical land invented for philosophical balance. They are the distinct, jagged scars of a real coastline, When we compare these indentations to the subglacial topography of Antarctica, the correlation is startling. The specific curves and peninsula's rots drew a line with the hidden, ice-buried contours of Queen Maud Land and Enderby Land, regions whose true shape was a complete mystery until the 20th century. How could a cartographer in 1542 depict with such specificity a landscape that has been invisible for millions of years? The answer lies in Rotz's own background. He was a prominent member of the Deep School of Cartography, a secretive and highly skilled group of French mapmakers. The Deep School had a notorious reputation for acquiring, through espionage or clandestine purchase, the most closely guarded Portuguese and Spanish portolan charts. These were the state secrets of the age, the actual logs and coastal profiles recorded by the explorers themselves. Rotz was not drawing from myth or rumor. His detailed southern continent was almost certainly compiled from these stolen, first-hand accounts of voyages into the far southern seas. His map is therefore a critical piece of the puzzle. It acts as a clear bridge connecting the theoretical ancient maps to the practical, empirical data being gathered by the great age of exploration. It suggests that the early Portuguese explorers were not just guessing about a southern land, they were actually charting its frozen fringes, and their confidential findings were being quietly incorporated into the most advanced maps of the day, preserving the ghost of an ice-free Antarctica for one more generation. The sheer reach of Sebastian Munster's work makes his depiction of the South impossible to ignore. His Cosmographia, first published in 1540, was not just a book, it was a 16th-century bestseller, a sweeping encyclopedia of the world that was devoured by tens of thousands of readers across Europe. His world map, printed within its pages, became one of the most influential images of geography for generations. On it, he drew a vast terra australis, a southern continent that most historians dismiss as pure Renaissance speculation, a placeholder for the unknown. But look closer, his continent is not a perfect, symmetrical ring around the pole as seen in purely philosophical models. It clings specifically to the southern tip of South America, connected by a narrow land bridge, and its shape is oddly lopsided and irregular. This is not the work of a man simply filling empty space with a neat idea. It feels more like an attempt to reconcile conflicting reports, to piece together a puzzle where some of the pieces were missing. He was a compiler, a scholar who gathered every source he could find, from ancient Roman texts to the accounts of contemporary explorers. What if, buried within that mountain of information, were fragments of those same ancient charts that guided Piri Reis and Oronteus Finaeus? By publishing his map to such a massive audience, Munster did something profound. He took the concept of a southern continent out of the secretive, locked cabinets of kings and admirals and placed it directly into the public imagination. He helped cement the idea of Antarctica in the European mind, not as a myth, but as a real geographic certainty waiting to be found. Even if his own drawing was flawed, it may have served as a vessel, carrying a single, vital kernel of ancient truth across centuries, ensuring the mystery would not be forgotten. Another Portuguese chart whispers secrets from the very edge of the known world. The Antonio Pereira map, drawn around 1500, is a stunningly prescient document created 2 full decades before Ferdinand Magellan's ships would ever enter the treacherous strait that now bears his name. This rare manuscript map clearly illustrates a navigable sea passage cutting south of the South American continent. That alone is a historical bombshell, but the map's true mystery lies just to the south of this passage. There, Pereira drew a distinct and substantial landmass separate from South America, rising from the Southern Ocean. This is not the vague, philosophical terra australis that ringed the globe on other maps. Its shape and placement are too specific, too localized. It aligns perfectly with the Antarctic Peninsula, the long, mountainous arm of Antarctica that reaches up toward the tip of South America. And critically, this peninsula is depicted as a green, hospitable land, completely free of the immense ice sheets that define it today. The implication is staggering. A Portuguese cartographer, years before any official European discovery, not only knew about the Strait of Magellan but also knew what lay directly across the water from it, an ice-free Antarctic coast. So where did this impossible knowledge originate? The most compelling theory points to the legendary secrecy of the Portuguese crown. Their Casa da India was a locked repository of state secrets, a vault containing the most confidential reports and charts from their explorers. It is entirely possible that an anonymous Portuguese caravel, blown off course or simply sailing farther south than recorded, had glimpsed both the strait and the peninsula, and its captain's report was immediately classified, its details only leaking out to a privileged few cartographers like Pereira. An even more ancient possibility exists. Arab traders had dominated the Indian Ocean for centuries, their dhows sailing vast distances. What if their own navigational charts, which the Portuguese would have eagerly acquired as they pushed into the Indian Ocean, contained fragments of this southern geography? The Pereira map feels less like a guess and more like a confident report, a snapshot of a coastline someone had actually seen. It suggests that the discovery of Antarctica was not a single event, but a slow, secretive rediscovery, a puzzle whose pieces were being assembled from both recent exploration and ancient inherited knowledge. The world of Renaissance mapmaking was not just a scholarly pursuit, it was also a thriving business. In the bustling workshops of Venice, a cartographer named Battista Agnese turned geography into an art form. His atlases were masterpieces of the bookmaker's craft, luxurious leather-bound volumes created on commission for Europe's wealthiest nobles and princes. They were status symbols filled with beautifully illuminated maps adorned with gold leaf. Yet within these exquisite objects lies a cartographic puzzle. Agnese was prolific, and across his many atlases, he consistently included a vast southern continent. In one particularly compelling version from the 1540s, this land is anything but empty. Its coastlines are intricately drawn, and most astonishingly, it is labeled with mysterious place names. These are not the fanciful names of myth like the Kingdom of Prester John. They are specific, seemingly geographical labels for capes, bays, and regions, names that appear nowhere else in the historical record. Why would a commercial mapmaker, whose reputation depended on delivering the most current and accurate information to his powerful clients, fill a supposedly theoretical land with utterly fictitious names? It makes no sense. The most logical explanation is that he was not inventing them. Agnese was almost certainly copying from what was considered the cutting edge of secret geographical knowledge. His clients expected the latest intelligence, and that intelligence, gleaned from Portuguese or Spanish portolan charts, apparently included a charted southern land with its own native topography. These unknown names are ghost words, echoes from a lost geography. They suggest that someone, long before Agnese picked up his pen, had not only seen this coastline but had mapped it in enough detail to name its features. The Agnese Atlas, for all its commercial beauty, becomes a silent witness. It proves that the idea of a detailed, habitable southern continent was not a fringe theory, but a piece of guarded cartographic fact so valuable that the rich and powerful of Europe were willing to pay a fortune to see it drawn in gold upon their private library walls. In 1587, a Milanese nobleman named Urbano Monti set out to create the largest and most complete map of the world ever conceived. The result was a staggering planisphere, a map so enormous it was drawn across 60 individual sheets of paper, designed to be assembled into a single, breathtaking disk over 9 feet in diameter. His chosen perspective was revolutionary, a North Polar azimuthal projection that placed the top of the world at its very center, allowing the continents to spiral outward in all directions. For all its focus on the north, however, one of its most haunting details lies at its absolute opposite edge at the southern pole. There, Monty drew a massive, sprawling continent, but it is not the smooth, circular landmass seen on other maps of his time. His Antarctica is a bizarre, almost alien shape, riddled with deep indentations, large inland seas, and distinct, snaking mountain ranges. This is not a simple placeholder. It is a complex, tortured geography that seems to depict a real and varied landscape. The question is, where did such a specific and intricate vision come from? Urbano Monti provided the answer himself in his extensive accompanying writings. He was not a world traveler, but a compiler, a scholar who openly admitted that his monumental work was a synthesis of everything he could gather. He listed his sources as a vast library of ancient and modern maps, a treasure trove of charts spanning centuries. His depiction of the southern continent was not an artist's invention, but a painstaking attempt to reconcile and combine all these different and often conflicting ancient sources into one unified image. The strange, fragmented Antarctica he produced, with its apparent seas and mountains, may be the most honest rendering of all, a composite photograph made from the scattered, ghostly fragments of a lost world map. It is as if he was trying to piece together a shattered vase, and the jagged, complex continent he assembled at the bottom of his great map is the closest any cartographer ever came to showing us what the original, pre-glacial world actually looked like. Just a few years after Urbano Monti's ambitious project, a very different kind of mapmaker was at work in England. Henry Briggs was not a fanciful artist but a renowned mathematician, the very man who helped develop the modern decimal system of logarithms. In 1625, he published a map titled The North Part of America. Its primary focus was the accurate charting of the New World, but tucked away in a small, unassuming inset at the bottom corner lies a cartographic bombshell. Briggs depicted the South Pole, and his terra australis incognita is unlike any philosophical guess. Its coastline is a jagged, irregular mess of deep bays and sharp, protruding headlands. This is not the smooth, perfectly circular continent drawn by theorists who believed in pure symmetry. This looks like the rough, unfinished sketch of a real coastline, the kind a sailor would draw after seeing a distant, treacherous shore. So why would a man of Briggs's immense scientific reputation, a scholar devoted to precision and mathematical truth, include such a specific and chaotic shape? The answer lies in his unique position. As a leading intellectual, Henry Briggs had unparalleled access to the most confidential reports returning to England from its explorers and merchant adventurers. He was at the very heart of a network receiving first-hand accounts from voyages into the southern oceans. His jagged, broken coastline was almost certainly not an invention. It was a compilation, a cautious synthesis of the latest, most secretive geographical intelligence. He was likely working from fragmented sailors' logs and stolen portolan charts that described a vast southern land with an impossibly complex and indented shore. This single scientific inset transforms the entire mystery. It moves the discussion from ancient, lost civilizations to the very real possibility that early 17th century explorers were themselves catching glimpses of an ice-free Antarctic coast, their confused and conflicting reports being faithfully recorded by the most meticulous cartographic mind of the age. Briggs gives us a snapshot of discovery in progress, a moment when inherited ancient knowledge and modern empirical sighting were colliding, creating a map that was both a record of the past and a prophecy of what was still to be officially found. A German priest and astronomer named Johannes Schörner was quietly crafting a small revolution in the way people saw the world. In 1515 and again in 1520, he produced a pair of terrestrial globes that were among the very first to depict the New World. But it is what he placed in the vast, empty Southern Ocean that captures our attention. There, sprawled across the bottom of his globes, is a massive continent he boldly labeled Brasilia Regio. Its shape is immediately striking, not a smooth circle but a lumpy, irregular landmass with a long, protruding peninsula and a deeply indented coastline. To the modern eye, this outline feels strangely familiar. When researchers later compared Schörner's continent to the actual coastline of Antarctica, they noted an uncanny resemblance, particularly in that long peninsula which seems to mirror the Antarctic Peninsula reaching up toward South America. This was no philosophical symmetry, this was a specific shape, a cartographic statement. Schörner's genius lay not in his own travels, for he never left Europe, but in the company he kept. He was a central figure in a vibrant intellectual circle in Nuremberg, a hub for scholars, mathematicians, and most importantly, men with direct links to the Portuguese royal court. Through these connections, Schörner had access to the most closely guarded secrets of the age, the Portuguese secret archives filled with the confidential reports and charts brought back by their explorers. He was not guessing, he was compiling the latest intelligence, and his conclusion was radical for its time. He explicitly stated that this southern land, his Brasilia Regio, was a continent entirely separate from the Americas. This was a profound departure from the common belief that any southern land would simply be an extension of the New World. Schörner's globe gave the world a new geographic entity, a distinct and distant continent, mapped with a shape that would only be confirmed by science hundreds of years later. The Dutch Golden Age of mapmaking produced works of such beauty and precision they were more art than science. At the very pinnacle of this tradition stands Willem Blieu, the official cartographer to the powerful Dutch East India Company. His Great World Map of 1635, a sprawling chart whose Latin title translates to a new geographical and hydrographical map of the entire world, is a breathtaking display of Baroque artistry and cutting-edge geography. Its depiction of the southern continent is a critical piece of our puzzle. While Blieu's Terra Australis remains connected to the tip of South America by a narrow sliver of land, a cartographic convention of the time, the region just south of that connection is rendered with startling specificity. This is the area we now know as the Antarctic Peninsula, and on Blieu's map it is not a smooth, speculative curve. Its coastline is a chaotic, jagged mess of fjords, inlets, and fractured islands, a level of detail that feels observational, not theoretical. This was not a man filling empty space with a philosophical idea. This was a man with access to the world's most valuable secrets. As the chief mapmaker for the Dutch East India Company, Blieu resided at the very heart of a global intelligence network. His desk was the final destination for the confidential logs of every Dutch captain who braved the southern oceans, the secret reports of spies in Portuguese and Spanish ports, and the most up-to-date charts acquired through commerce or conquest. The company's survival depended on accurate geography, and Blieu's maps were their ultimate strategic tool. So when he chose to engrave such a uniquely ragged and complex coastline for the southern land, he was almost certainly working from something tangible. Was he synthesizing fresh reports from Dutch explorers who had seen the icy, mountainous peninsula from their decks? Or was he carefully copying an even older, classified Portolan chart that had found its way into the company's vaults? A chart that depicted not an ice-locked fortress, but a rugged, temperate coastline. Blieu's map stands at a crossroads, a fusion of the era's best empirical data and the persistent, haunting ghost of an ancient geography. His jagged southern shore is a testament to the fact that the most advanced mapmaker of his generation believed he was charting a real place, a land whose true, ice-free nature was a secret the past refused to surrender. In the gilded halls of the French royal palace at Versailles, two colossal spheres stood as the ultimate symbols of a king's power to comprehend the entire world. Crafted by the Venetian Franciscan monk Vincenzo Coronelli for Louis XIV, these immense globes, each over 3 meters in diameter, were more than just maps, they were cosmic declarations of knowledge. Coronelli, a master cartographer and founder of the first Geographical Society, had access to the most extensive archives in Europe. His depiction of the southern continent, Terra Australis, is a fascinating paradox. It is lavishly adorned with illustrations of mythical beasts and exotic peoples, the kind of speculative decoration one might expect from a 17th century artist filling blank spaces. Yet beneath this artistic flourish lies a geography that is startlingly coherent. The continent's coastline is not a smooth, philosophical ring. It is sharply defined with deep, purposeful indentations. One of the most prominent is a massive gulf cutting deeply into the eastern side of the landmass, a feature Coronelli labeled the Gulf of the West. When we compare this gulf to modern subglacial surveys of Antarctica, the correlation is breathtaking. It aligns almost perfectly with the vast, ice-filled expanse of the Ross Sea, a defining feature of the continent's actual topography that was completely unknown at the time. Other coastal curves and peninsulas on his globe similarly mirror the hidden landscape beneath the ice. How did a monk in Venice capture such details? Coronelli's immense project was fueled by more than just royal patronage. It was informed by a global network of knowledge, most notably the far-reaching reports of Jesuit missionaries. These learned men were traveling to the farthest corners of the earth, from the courts of China to the islands of the Pacific, and they were meticulous observers. They sent back letters, charts, and descriptions that formed a river of clandestine geographical intelligence flowing directly into European scholarly circles. It is entirely plausible that within these Jesuit accounts were fragmented descriptions of southern lands, perhaps ancient charts preserved in Asian libraries or oral traditions from Polynesian navigators who spoke of a great white land to the south. Coronelli, the great compiler, would have sifted through these whispers and fragments, weaving them into his grand design. His globe stands as a monumental fusion of myth and latent truth, where the fanciful drawings of sea monsters cannot completely obscure the ghostly, accurate coastline of a continent that should have been a complete mystery. Across the world, another great seafaring empire was creating maps that whisper of southern lands. The story of Chinese cartography offers some of the most tantalizing and fiercely debated pieces of this puzzle. At the center of the storm is a document known as the Zheng Map, a modern copy of a chart supposedly drawn in 1418. If authentic, this map would be nothing short of revolutionary, as it depicts the entire world with a shocking accuracy that should have been impossible for its time. It shows the coastlines of Africa, Europe, and the Americas, and at the very bottom, a recognizable and clearly defined continent of Antarctica, rendered with features that are startlingly accurate. The map's proponents argue it is a copy of an original chart from the fleets of the legendary Chinese admiral Zheng He, whose massive treasure ships, some of them over 400 feet long, embarked on epic voyages across the Indian Ocean decades before the European age of exploration. The implications are staggering, suggesting that a Chinese fleet not only reached the Americas but also sailed into the frigid southern oceans to map an ice-free Antarctica. Yet the map's authenticity is hotly contested. Many scholars dismiss it as an elaborate modern forgery, pointing to stylistic inconsistencies and the fact that it only surfaced in 2001. The debate is a perfect microcosm of the entire mystery, a clash between a breathtaking narrative and the rigid standards of historical proof. Whether the Zheng He map is a genuine relic or a brilliant fake, it forces us to confront a profound question. What if the greatest age of exploration was not European but Chinese, and its records were simply lost to time? While the Zheng He map remains mired in controversy, there are other Chinese charts whose authenticity is beyond doubt, and they too point south. The Da Ming Hunyi II, the amalgamated map of the Great Ming Empire, was created in 1389. This magnificent map, painted on silk, is a detailed representation of the world as known to the Chinese court. Its most striking feature is a vast, mysterious landmass located far to the south of Java. This is not a small island, but a substantial continent drawn with a defined, almost purposeful shape. It sits in the very ocean where traditional knowledge should have ended, a silent testament to something the Ming cartographers believed was there. This was no philosophical guess. It appears on an official state map, a document of imperial authority. So what was the source of this confident geography? The answer likely lies in the incredible maritime power of the Ming dynasty itself. Just a few decades after this map was made, Admiral Zheng, his colossal fleet, a floating city of hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men, would dominate the Indian Ocean. Their voyages were meticulously recorded, but most of those records were deliberately destroyed when a new emperor came to power, dismantling the fleet and turning China inward. This act of historical suppression is one of the great tragedies of exploration. What if the treasure fleets with their immense resources did not stop at the coast of Africa? What if some of their ships, driven by curiosity or storm, sailed farther south than anyone thought possible? The knowledge of a great southern land, perhaps even glimpsed from their decks, would have been recorded in the very logs that were later burned. The Da Ming Hanyi II, then, is not just a map, it is a ghost, a surviving fragment from a world that could have been. A world where China mapped the globe first, only to deliberately forget what it had found. The Ottoman Mappa Mundi presents a world turned upside down, at least to a European eye. These magnificent 16th century creations, often lavishly decorated and rich with calligraphy, are not oriented with north at the top. Instead, they are frequently centered on the Indian Ocean, the heart of their own vast trading empire, with south positioned at the top of the page. This shift in perspective is more than just an artistic choice. It is a declaration of a different worldview, one built upon a unique synthesis of ancient knowledge. Ottoman cartographers were not explorers in the European sense. They were master compilers, drawing from a deep well of Greek, Arab, and Persian geographical texts that had been preserved and studied for centuries. Their world maps, while stylistically distinct from the practical lines of a Portuguese portolan, consistently feature a fascinating detail, a vast, enigmatic southern landmass. This continent is not drawn with the precise coastlines of a Piri Reis, but appears as a substantial, often stylized land, a place of mystery hanging at the bottom of their known world. How did this land find its way into the Ottoman geographical tradition? The most compelling clue lies in the empire's deep roots in Arab scholarship. For centuries, Arab traders had mastered the Indian Ocean, their sturdy dhows riding the predictable monsoon winds on annual voyages between East Africa, Arabia, and India. They were the undisputed masters of this maritime world, and their navigational knowledge was legendary. It is entirely plausible, even likely, that some of these vessels, blown off course by a rogue storm or simply driven by a thirst for discovery, sailed far to the south of Africa's Cape. There, they might have encountered the fringes of a great land, a coastline that was not yet frozen solid, its northernmost peaks and valleys still visible and habitable. They would have mapped what they saw, adding this new geography to their secret charts, knowledge that was then passed down through generations and eventually absorbed into the grand, synthesized worldviews of the Ottoman mapmakers. This southern continent on the Mappa Mundi is therefore a ghost from a different age of exploration, a silent testament to the Arab mariners who may have charted the ends of the earth long before any European ship ever dared. Just 6 years before Captain James Cook would embark on his first historic voyage into the southern seas, a rural cartographer from the Austrian Alps was finishing a map that seemed to belong to a different era. Peter Anisch's Atlas Tyrolensis, published in 1756, was a masterpiece of local surveying, an incredibly detailed chart of his home region of Tyrol. Yet tucked into a corner of this provincial map was a small, almost casual world inset, and there, at the bottom, sprawled the familiar shape of Terra Australis. This was not the blank space of an unknown land that explorers like Cook were about to confront. Anisch's southern continent was lush and green, with flowing rivers and a coastline free of ice, a pre-glacial vision rendered at the very moment the age of discovery was poised to shatter such myths. How could this be? Anish was not a global explorer with access to the latest naval reports from London or Paris. He was a farmer's son, a provincial surveyor working from the sources available to him in his remote workshop. His map is a perfect snapshot of a pivotal moment in history, a moment when two different streams of knowledge were about to collide. The mainstream scientific community, armed with new navigational tools and a spirit of empiricism, was on the verge of replacing ancient charts with fresh first-hand data. But Anish, isolated from these emerging trends, was almost certainly working from older, outdated atlases and reference books volumes that themselves were compilations of even older maps. His Terra Australis, therefore, is not a mistake, it is a fossil. It is the last echo of that ancient cartographic tradition, the one that spoke of a green and habitable southern land. While the leading geographers of his day were preparing to dismiss the great southern continent as a fantasy, Anish's humble map suggests they were throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They were discarding the new, incomplete exploration data that showed only ice and stormy seas, but in doing so, they were also dismissing the persistent, detailed geography preserved in those older sources. Peter Anish, the rural cartographer, may have inadvertently preserved a profound truth that the most advanced scientists of his generation were about to sail right past. His map asks us a haunting question: what if progress sometimes means forgetting a deeper, more ancient reality? The final piece of this puzzle is perhaps the most enigmatic, for it exists not as a single, surviving chart, but as a ghost in the writings of a man who stood at the crossroads of magic and empire. John Dee, the brilliant mathematician, astrologer, and confidential advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, was a man obsessed with secrets. His private library was one of the largest in all of Europe, a treasure trove of ancient maps, crumbling manuscripts, and esoteric texts that he believed held the key to a lost world history. While we have no definitive John Dee map of Antarctica, his own voluminous notes and personal sketches reveal a profound and startling belief. He was utterly convinced that a vast, temperate, and inhabited southern continent not only existed, but that the British Crown held a legal and historical claim to it. His argument was not based on the voyages of Drake or Frobisher, but on something far older. Dee championed the legend of Prince Madoc, a Welsh prince who, according to lore, sailed across the Atlantic with a fleet of ships in the 12th century, long before Columbus. Dee argued that Madoc's descendants had not only reached the Americas but had continued sailing, eventually discovering and settling the great southern land of Terra Australis. To modern ears, this sounds like pure mythology, but for Dee it was a political tool, a historical precedent he presented to the Queen to justify a British empire that would span the entire globe. The critical question is, what was the source of his unshakable confidence? His belief was not born from mere legend. It was grounded in the very real, ancient cartography he hoarded in his library. Dee's own writings reference specific, pre-Christian maps that depicted the southern continent with startling accuracy. He spoke of charts drawn from the knowledge of the Phoenicians and the ancient Greeks, maps that showed a world far more completely explored than anyone in the 16th century dared to believe. He was using these lost records to construct a narrative of British destiny, a narrative that required the southern continent to be a real, charted, and claimable place. John Dee's lost map of Antarctica, therefore, is not a physical object we can hold. It is a composite, a phantom coastline pieced together from the most secret atlases of antiquity. His life's work suggests that the knowledge of an ice-free Antarctica was not just preserved in a few scattered charts, but formed a coherent body of geographical lore, a hidden tradition accessible only to those like Dee, who knew where to look and, more importantly, how to read the whispers of the past. When we step back from these 25 individual charts, a startling pattern emerges from the parchment and ink. These maps, drawn by different hands across diverse cultures and centuries, share a set of impossible commonalities. They consistently depict coastlines that mirror the subglacial topography we have only recently discovered with seismic technology. They show a continent completely free of its immense ice cap, with flowing river systems carved into landscapes that are now buried under miles of solid ice. Most tellingly, they present a recognizable and consistent shape for Antarctica, a shape that persists from the Turkish admiral to the French geographer to the Chinese imperial court. This is not random guesswork. This is the repetition of a specific, detailed geography. According to everything we know about conventional history, this knowledge should not exist. No medieval or Renaissance explorer could have seen these coastlines, and no theoretical model could have accurately guessed the land that lies beneath the ice. The scientific impossibility is absolute. So how do we explain this chorus of ancient voices all singing the same song? The most radical theory points to a shadow in our past, a prehistorical, advanced seafaring civilization. Scholars like Charles Hapgood, who first meticulously compared these maps to modern surveys, proposed that a forgotten culture with sophisticated navigational skills explored the entire globe during a remote, warmer climatic period. This was a time when Antarctica was not a frozen desert, but a temperate land with rivers and mountains. This lost civilization, whose name and memory have been utterly erased by time and catastrophe, supposedly created a master world map. Their incredible geographical knowledge was then fragmentedly preserved, copied and recopied by later cultures like the Phoenicians, the Greeks, and finally the medieval cartographers who, not understanding what they were drawing, faithfully traced the coastlines of a world that had vanished beneath the ice ages ago. This theory, popularized in our own time by researchers like Graham Hancock, suggests that human history is not a straight line from primitive to advanced, but a cycle with forgotten peaks. The maps are not just curiosities, they are the surviving fingerprints of that lost world, challenging us to rewrite our story from its very foundations. Of course, the existence of these maps presents a profound historical mystery, but we must also listen to the clear and reasoned voice of mainstream science. The academic consensus offers a very different and far less mysterious explanation for what we are seeing. Historians of cartography point out that for centuries, the idea of a great southern continent was not a rediscovered truth, but a philosophical necessity. This concept, known as terra australis incognita, dates all the way back to the ancient Greek geographer Ptolemy, who argued that the large landmasses of the northern hemisphere must be balanced by an equally large continent in the south to prevent the world from tipping over. This was not based on exploration, but on a desire for symmetry and balance in the cosmos. For Renaissance mapmakers, filling the empty southern oceans with this speculative land was a tradition, a convention of their craft. They were not copying ancient charts of Antarctica. They were engaging in an exercise of theoretical geography, illustrating a belief rather than a fact. When we look at a map like Piri Reis, critics argue that the mysterious southern land is not Antarctica at all, but simply a badly distorted, unfinished representation of the eastern coast of South America, a common error in early 16th century charts. The features that seem so compelling to us are, in this view, nothing more than artistic flourishes or the result of merging several conflicting reports from explorers who had never ventured that far south. Similarly, the stunning accuracy of the Oronteus Finaeus Map is dismissed as a combination of incredible luck and clever guesswork. His continent, they say, is a hypothetical shape that, by pure coincidence, bears a passing resemblance to the land under the ice, but its rivers and mountains are merely decorative elements, not evidence of real hydrological systems. The most powerful scientific counterargument, however, comes not from history books but from the ice itself. Scientists have drilled deep into the Antarctic ice sheet, extracting long cores that act as a frozen timeline stretching back millions of years. The data from these ice cores is unequivocal. They show that the continent has been locked in a deep, persistent freeze for at least 15 million years, with a permanent ice cap covering its entire surface. There has been no temperate, ice-free period in Antarctica since long before the dawn of humanity, let alone during the time of any hypothetical advanced civilization that could have mapped it. This creates an insurmountable chronological problem for the ancient mapmaker theory. If the continent has been buried under ice for epochs, then no human eyes could have ever seen those coastlines to map them. So where does this leave us standing between these two irreconcilable viewpoints, one pointing to a chorus of impossible maps and the other to the unyielding evidence of ancient ice? This unresolved conflict between ice core data and ancient parchment leaves us standing at a historical crossroads. We are forced to confront a fundamental question about the story we tell ourselves, the linear narrative of human progress that marches steadily from primitive to advanced. These maps challenge that entire framework, suggesting our history might not be a straight line, but a circle, with forgotten peaks of achievement that collapsed into amnesia. The implications are staggering, even if only one of these charts is genuinely based on an ancient source. A single, verified map would be enough to shatter the conventional timeline, proving that a sophisticated, seafaring culture capable of global navigation existed in a time we consider prehistoric. It would mean that our civilization is not the first to ask questions about the world, but perhaps merely the latest to rediscover its secrets. Modern technology has given us a powerful tool to measure this mystery. Satellite-based radar topography, like that used in projects such as Operation Ice Bridge, has allowed us to peel back the ice sheet and map the true continent beneath. We now possess a perfect scientific benchmark, a ghost image of Antarctica's naked landscape. Placing the Piri Reis or Oronteus Finaeus charts over this modern subglacial map creates a moment of profound dissonance as ancient ink aligns with data gathered from orbit. This is not a vague resemblance, it is a correlation that defies simple coincidence, so we are left with the ultimate haunting possibility. Were our ancestors, the medieval monks, the Ottoman admirals, the Chinese scholars, not the inventors of this geography, but merely its last librarians? Were they the recipients of a lost legacy of global exploration, a legacy whose faded, fragile fragments are preserved for us in these perplexing pieces of parchment? We have traveled through a gallery of whispers, from the Turkish parchment of Piri Reis to the secret library of John Dee. 25 maps drawn across continents and centuries all point toward a single, impossible reality. They form a chorus of voices, each singing a song about a world that should not exist in their time. The core paradox remains, chilling in its simplicity. How could so many different cartographers, separated by culture and epoch, possess such precise geographical knowledge of a continent buried under miles of ice? The rivers drawn by Oronteus Finaeus, the jagged coastlines rendered by Jean Rotz, the bifurcated continent of Philippe Buache, they all align with a landscape that has been invisible for millions of years. This is not a single anomaly, it is a pattern, and patterns demand an explanation. So where does this leave us? We are faced with a choice between three profound possibilities. The first is the most revolutionary, that these maps are the fragmented legacy of a prehistorical, advanced seafaring civilization, a culture whose name is lost to time but whose master world map was copied and recopied down through the ages. The second is a monument to coincidence, suggesting that centuries of theoretical guesswork and artistic license somehow, against all odds, produced a consistently accurate ghost image of a continent no one had seen. The third is that we are witnessing a series of colossal misunderstandings, where the distorted coastlines of known lands were misinterpreted and merged into a phantom continent. Yet, even the most skeptical explanation cannot entirely dissolve the eerie correlations that persist across the entire collection. Regardless of which answer you find most compelling, these artifacts stand as one of history's most captivating and enduring puzzles. They remind us that our past is not a closed book, its chapters neatly bound and fully understood. It is an ongoing detective story filled with cryptic clues and unanswered questions. The mystery of the ice-free maps invites us to look deeper, to question the established narrative, and to wonder what other secrets are still hidden, waiting for a curious mind to connect the dots. What do you think after this journey through lost geography? Which of these 25 maps do you find the most convincing piece of evidence? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you are hungry for more deep dives into the world's greatest historical mysteries, be sure to subscribe. The investigation is far from over.